Hey guys, back again this week with another large scale kit with Hasegawa's 1/32nd scale N1K2-J uh, fighter and markings for the series Shidenkai no Maki. Let's open this one up. Alright. Set that aside for a second. Now, one thing that this particular boxing comes with is an additional set of resin figures for standing and seed pilot figure. And obviously I'm going to leave those in because they're fairly delicate and I really don't want to do anything that could potentially damage them. Though I will admit I'm a little surprised that they did not package that a little better. So diving right into the main part of the kit, first sprue out of the gate gives us the main floor for the cockpit tub as well as the cockpit sidewalls, the paneling for the armament bays, which I'm a little surprised that they did as separate, but as I think one advantage this does give us is that if you want to add in a aftermarket weapon bay, well, actually take that back, since most of the time you'd be accessing from top, I guess that's kind of pointless. But they do give these as separate inserts for the main wings. Again, not 100% sure on the reasoning to do that, but I digress. As well as, excuse me. Also on this sprue, we do have several additional structural parts. Now, right out gate, you can really start to get a sense of eyes for this cockpit from the cockpit floor here. This is a big kit. It is not little. And, if you think about the case I-61 we've previously reviewed, it was about, I'd say maybe about a third the size of this. So definitely a lot bigger. Continue on. This sprue gives us more structural parts to actually support the fuselage itself, which again tells you just how large this kit is, that it actually requires you to add in these large structural elements. This one gives you a good sense of size. We also get this wing spar, again telling you how big this thing is. That also doubles as providing some of the base detail for the main gear bay. And I'll try to, as best I can, get this to show up. Unfortunately, don't know if it will, but there is some surface detailing there. Continue on, we do have some cockpit detail parts, such as our throttles and some of the seat and other odds and ends. Excuse me. We've got our two halves for the centerline tank, as well as the support brackets, though they're a little overscale. I think placing those with either resin or photo etch would do a better job, but it's, for most part, passable, and for most people will look fine. We also have our control stick and a standard figure. Next up, we've got our main cowling part, which again definitely gives you a sense of size for just how big this thing is. That's going to hide our large radial. Now, an interesting thing they did with this kit, they molded the tail halves as a separate piece. I don't know why they chose to do this, as that's going to introduce potential for misalignment and a lot more work and cleanup. I could understand them doing this if the George had different tails throughout its life, and if they also included it, if it did have it, but it doesn't. So to me, it makes no sense to do it this way. It would have been better if they had molded it onto the fuselage halves as opposed to that way. Since I'm going to have to get out of the way, we'll do the clear parts next. Obviously, typical breakdown for canopy parts. Got our front windscreen, central part, and two different back windows. One with a more pronounced framing. So you do have some options. Obviously, you want to pay attention, as well as a couple of lights and other bits. Now, next up, we've got our two main fuselage halves. Now, these are big. You can tell by my hand. No, this is a big kit, and will obviously make for a nice impression piece. Now, they did also include on this sprue our horizontal tail planes, but they molded it as two separate parts that you sandwich together. Again, I wish they hadn't chose to do it in this manner, but obviously it's a lot easier to work with those than trying to align the main tail to itself and then onto the rest of the fuselage. Carrying on, we have our flaps that are a two-piece assembly. Obviously, when we get an instruction sheet, you do have to do a little bit of surgery if you want to do them in the raised position. We'll discuss that in the instructions. We also have our main gear bays as well. Next up, we've got another part with some wheels, our tires, and some landing gear detail parts, and two of the propeller blades. Excuse me 1 second. Sorry about that. Next up, we've got the parts for our engines, and you can tell right away from both the meatiness of the engine mounting as well as the size of our cylinders, just how really big this kit is. And you get a lot of detail in this engine just right out of the gate. Hasegawa did a great job here. You'll be able to build up a very nicely and detailed engine without having to resort to aftermarket. The only critique I have is here with the ignition wires. Those would probably have been better done as a photo etch part, just because of how thin and narrow they need to be, or alternatively include some type of wire with it. So, carrying on, we've got our main gear legs, which again are out of the gate not bad. I mean, they could be slightly more detailed, but we're getting really splitting hairs here. We've got our cockpit side panels and main dash. Again, they're passable. Could be a little better, but again, not a whole lot to complain about. And lastly, we've got our main seat. No molded on seat belts, so you will have to source your own. Last sprue in the box gives us our main wings. Again, huge. I mean, just absolutely huge and very impressively detailed. All of the surface detailing is very fine, high quality Hasegawa. Oops. Pop that off. One thing to note, be careful here. I gotta really reach with these parts here, as they are very thin and delicate. Let me get all this back in, and we'll move on to decals. Come on. All right. So, single decal sheet with, in fact, actually markings for two different versions of the kit. Designated between, main difference being these bands here. Other than that, we also have a bunch of decals for the figures, as well as some of the cockpit parts. Now, I do like they include both a full solid one here, as well as just the instrument gauges. That's a nice touch, and I like whenever they give us options, and here I do commend Hasegawa for doing it this way. Overall, print quality is fantastic. All the colors are nice, rich, and proper register. Now, moving on to the instructions. Starting out, we get paint key as well as decaling instructions for the figure, as well as a few little tidbits, which I do like that they include with this kit. They do offer some sound advice, albeit machine translated. So do take them with a grain of salt, but again, they're actually halfway decent and helpful. Moving on, typical flow, start with the cockpit and build up from there. Do be aware there's a couple of different ways to get the cockpit color at once. It lists 2 different just straight colors and then 1 mixed one. So be aware that you do have options. You don't necessarily have to run out and get a special color for this. The main issue I see here is that since it is a large scale kit, you do have a lot of little detail pieces that you're going to need to make sure you get on and attached properly. So that is something to be aware of. Continue on. Now, as I was mentioning before, you do have to do a bit of surgery on the flaps to get them in the raised position, namely trimming off these parts. Now, this is where it's going to be, in my opinion, a major issue point, as you're basically going to have to make sure you cut this in just the right way, as otherwise it's not going to fit properly. So I think Hasegawa did a very bad choice of way to mold this by doing it this way instead of giving us a separate flat part, or at least include some other way to do it from the raised to the lower position, with obviously the raised being the main sort of way of doing it, as it's a lot easier to add parts on than it is to trim parts down. So continue on, we do have a lot more detailing that goes into building up our landing gear, and again, a little helpful detail or tips that they give help with getting that done. Then we go on to our nice big radial engine, which looks fantastic. And then finally just closing up the cockpit. Again, the single paint scheme, albeit differentiating with tail, does include a little bit of tidbit on that. And yeah. So overall, it's a complicated kit, but a very well done kit overall. Again, the whole issue with the flaps is a big problem. As you know, if you screw up cutting it, you're kind of hosed. You're going to have to then source aftermarket flaps, which can be a pain. So I would say if you're going that route, definitely I would say undercut it and then just test fit and sand it down. That would be the easiest way, in my opinion, to get that edge flush. Beyond that, though, it's definitely a different subject. Huge kit. It's definitely going to be a shelf hog. But at the same time, it'd be a great statement piece. So, that was a look at Hasegawa's 1/32 scale N1K2-J and markings for the series Shidenkai no Maki. Until next time.